Welcome. Appreciate you taking the time to speak with the Naples Daily News Editorial Board. We usually ask the candidate to take the first few minutes to say, here's my background, this is why I'm running for this post at this time. We start asking questions and our 30-minute time limit goes pretty fast. So
Got it.
I'll give you the floor.
Thank you. I'm Dan Gelber. I'm a candidate for Attorney General. I'm currently a state senator, and I served in the House for about a decade, where I was elected to be the Democratic leader for a couple of years. Most of my public service before I ran for office was as a federal prosecutor. I come from a family of prosecutors and school teachers. Pretty much everybody in my family is one or the other, and my sister was a prosecutor and is now a school teacher. So that's really my background. I spent nearly a decade in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Miami. I tried every kind of case that you can try, from actually including here in Naples when the Southern District included Naples, but down from Monroe up to Martin County. I ultimately ran the Civil Rights Unit and then became the deputy of an office of over 200 lawyers, prosecutors, and managed hundreds, if maybe thousands, of investigations. I worked in the U.S. Senate when Sam Nunn asked me to run the U.S. Senate's Investigations Committee, and I did counterterrorism investigations for a couple of years around the country and around the world. And then I came back here and I started my political life. I'm running because I think Florida has really has jumped the curve. I think we've gone way off. I think nobody in this state, I think, really believes that anybody in Tallahassee has their back. And I'm looking forward to using my skills as a lawyer, as a prosecutor, to be the chief legal officer of the state of Florida, and to really be that advocate for everyday Floridians when they're being exploited or when they need somebody to stand up for them. So let's get to your questions.
What do you suppose how do you intend to serve at our backs? How are you going to protect us?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, the first thing is I think the current Attorney General has been really more about politics than he has about doing what I think is the sweet spot of what any Attorney General is supposed to be, which is protecting the pocketbooks of everyday Floridians. If you look at our state, because of vulnerable communities, because of a lot of seniors, because of immigrant populations, we are ground zero for all sorts of fraud, whether it be Medicaid fraud, whether it be Ponzi schemes, whether it be business opportunity scandals. And I think if you look at most attorney generals, they have been ground zero at making sure that those people are protected and not exploited. And I think an attorney general is supposed to be most concerned about that in terms of civil prosecutions and criminal prosecutions. And I have a background in all those matters. I managed units that did that, and I prosecuted cases like that. I also think an attorney general in that area has to be the officer of the state who is figuring out what the next sort of crime du jour is going to be. If you look at, for instance, the housing market, we're now getting into loan originators. We're looking at what they did. Well, nobody's originating loans anymore. It's the guys who are doing loan consolidations and reverse mortgages, which are where the new fraud areas are. It's the job of the Attorney General to have that macro view of the state and to sort of plot a line for all of law enforcement and all the prosecutors to make sure that that next, we're not fighting the last war, we're fighting the next one, so to speak.
What about McCollum's efforts on cybercrime, specifically internet danger to children?
Yeah, I've got 3 kids, 12, 9, and 6. I had a guy living down the street from me, literally around the block, who was on one of those lists. Doesn't live there anymore because he was caught doing something a block from my house that was a violation of his probation. So I am very aware of this issue, and I think McCollum's done an able job. But I do think that a lot more education needs to happen, and I don't think you solve those problems simply with tough talk. Frankly, the most important...
He's gone around the state actually visiting himself, visiting schools and teaching families how they can keep kids safe from the dangers that are on the internet.
Yeah, I think those are great initiatives. Although I have problems with some of the things he's done in other areas, I support his efforts in terms of child predators.
What about his Medicare fraud?
Well, the health care fraud, I think we need more people working on it, and I think he has to come to the legislature and ask for more. If you look at Medicaid and Medicare fraud, every person you put into that does 2 things. Number 1, brings more money back into the system, and 2, deters behavior, and that's very important. And prosecutors will talk about, you could prosecute lots of drug dealers, and you're probably never going to deter drug dealers from their behavior. On the other hand, if you take a healthcare professional out of their office in handcuffs, all the others in the neighborhood and in the community perk up and wonder how that happened and what they should change to make sure they're not having that problem. And I think that it's very important that we get more into just like in Ponzi schemes and the economic crimes, when you deal with healthcare fraud, it does happen to be a crime du jour. It might be durable medical equipment, it might be pharmaceutical issues, but whatever it is, the bad guys generally and unfortunately sometimes are a step or two or more ahead of the good guys, and it's the job of the Attorney General to not simply have a group of prosecutors, but to also be that policymaker who says this is what's happening next, and we've got to be prepared for it, and I need manpower for it. And I don't think that McCollum has done that ably, because we're only now looking at some of the problems that emerged years ago when we should have been way ahead of the game.
How about on open records and government in the sunshine? The current Attorney General seems to be making some progress there from a newspaper editor's standpoint.
Not close to enough.
Really?
Not close to enough. I have the newspaper editor is given an award every year to the legislator who's been most prominent. I think I've won that 2 or 3 times in the last decade. Every single year, I think the leaders of our state should stand up and create more transparency in our process, especially the legislative process. And McCollum has never said a word about that. And I believe that the sunshine laws that apply to local commissioners should have greater application to the legislature. We've had a speaker indicted. We have scandals all the time. And if your local commissioners sit around and talk to each other about giving a lobbyist something, they go to jail. In Tallahassee, if 2 legislators sit with a lobbyist and put proviso language.
Is that lunch?
That's a lunch, basically. I mean, it's unbelievable. And this year I tried to push a constitutional amendment that nearly every ed board in Florida supported that would have simply applied part of that sunshine law to the legislature. And our state leaders, and this isn't a partisan issue, and it shouldn't be, refuse to do much more than just say, yeah, it sounds like a good idea, but I don't think we should do it because it'll impair the way we do business. And frankly, I think we've been doing business pretty shabbily in Tallahassee.
We know about your First Amendment awards, and kudos. But it seems that one of the areas that this newspaper has trouble getting what we consider public records from is law enforcement, state attorney's office, prosecutors, et cetera, when it gets into the realm of court cases.
Well, when something's an active investigation,
Right.
they're not going to give that out, and I think you all would understand that. I worked in an office that worked on wiretaps, worked on undercover operations. I've been in that world, and there are security reasons that have to be respected when that's going on. Under state law, I think done investigations, once they're completed, are available. Federal system, they're not, by the way. The FBI and DEA, their investigations aren't available to anybody, but in the state system in Florida, it's actually
Right.
a pretty dynamic system. It's pretty robust. So I don't know that I would ever support active investigations being made, and I will say this.
But
I put a lot of people in jail,
Right.
but the crosshairs of the government is an awesome and powerful tool, and if used in a cavalier way or used to simply destroy somebody's reputation, it's wrong. So I actually think in protection of people, you've got to be careful when you release information.
it seems a lot falls under that umbrella of active investigation.
Well, that's another story.
As an attorney general, would you be would you hold the door open to listen to people saying, "Hey, they're not giving us this"? I don't mean
Absolutely.
individual
Listen,
cases, but-
if an investigation is complete,
Right.
then state law should require that it be, that unless there's some other compelling reason, that it should be given to the
Yeah,
media.
we never have trouble getting
Right.
it completed.
Well, there's no excuse.
We have trouble getting them to say it's complete.
There's no excuse for that. And by the way, somebody who's done a lot of investigations, which I have done, is going to be able to know when an investigation is complete, is going to be able to render an independent judgment about that.
So if elected, you wouldn't mind a phone call or two?
I
from
wouldn't
us?
mind you, listen, listen, I'll tell you something. I think that, everybody talks about, the need for new laws on corruption, and I've put a lot of them forward. But frankly, much more important than the laws are simply creating more transparency in the process, because, the roaches run away when the light comes out. And that's just the nature of human behavior. So I believe it's very important to give the media, and more importantly, actually, the public, access to as much as they can get, and let the chips fall where they may. But if it's not truly an active investigation, it should be free for scrutiny.
What are we to make of BP?
This is one of the most complex litigations you're going to see ever. I think that the $20 billion that they've put up is our share of it might at best be considered earnest money, not more. frankly, because nobody knows what's going to happen. Can't say we've had a response because the thing is still spewing out poison in our Gulf. So I think while they took the mantle of responsible party, I think they had to do that, because if they didn't under the law, then the government does the cleanup and hands them the bill. So it's probably in their interest to have accepted that official title. All the money they're giving out now is probably a set-off against future verdicts. So they're not doing a whole lot that they don't have to do. I believe an attorney general is going to have to make sure that in this incredibly complex morass of litigation, civil, criminal, state, federal, criminal with victim remediation and administrative claims, that the attorney general's number one goal is to simply make sure that somebody is squarely looking at the backs of Florida, having their backs, because it's very possible that all this litigation may end up creating great difficulties for actual everyday people who don't have the wherewithal to have a claims agent on premises, or maybe fall prey to some of the lesser tier of lawyers who might want to exploit them. So I do think that an attorney general's got to be very squarely on that.
What should Floridians make of the fact that the firm that you just recently left was hired by BP to look out for BP?
Yeah, well, that's why I left. A couple weeks ago, the firm...
Did you leave right away?
I left within a couple weeks.
A couple weeks?
A couple weeks.
Why did it take that long?
Well, I've been a lawyer for 25 years. I have a lot of clients. You can't just leave your clients without, I'm on pleadings. I called them up, told them I was leaving, made arrangements for transitions. But I knew pretty quickly I wouldn't stay at the firm. I'm enough counsel. There are 500 lawyers. I didn't hear about it till after the fact. And once I heard about it, it was pretty obvious to me that I would be leaving. Only question was when.
But they knew you were running at that time. Wouldn't that firm taking BP as a client be kind of like throwing you under the bus?
Well, listen, the firm I was at, Ackerman Centerfit, is a 500-person firm.
Yeah, it's a big firm.
In 25, in 7 states with 25 offices or something like that. I'm of counsel. I can't expect them to comport themselves. I'm not even a shareholder. I don't have an interest in the firm financially. So from
you get like $225,000
I'm paid to do legal work, but not legal work having to do with that. So from my point of view, as soon as they made their decision, I had a decision to make, and my decision was to leave. I thought it was the right thing to do. I did it within just a couple weeks. I sent my notice last week to the firm telling them I was leaving. My opponent asked for my resignation from the firm 5 days after I'd already resigned, but that's the nature of politics these days.
Is there a paper trail that would verify?
Yeah, I have.
Because you've been criticized for not announcing your resignation, I guess, publicly until after the criticism was leveled by your opponent.
Yeah, I mean, it's all pretty silly. I sent an email last week to the firm president saying, as we discussed, I'm leaving. I'm trying to close up my final client matters, and I'll be gone at that time.
Can you share that with us?
Absolutely. And by the way, let's understand something. I've been a lawyer a long time. I have a lot of clients at this that I've sort of taken care of. You can't just tell a client, good luck to you. I'm on all your pleadings in court, but we'll see. See what happens. I had to really do what I needed to do, which was let them know I was leaving. I freely told people that I was leaving. In fact, I was at an ed board last week, and they asked me what I was doing, and I said I'm leaving the firm next week. Not even talking about the BP case. So I haven't. This isn't some game. I mean, I actually felt like it was important for me to go.
To assure Floridians that you have their backs.
Yeah.
Okay? Just in plain language, and I didn't go to law school. Probably a good thing.
You do pretty well.
But why not say, whoa, BP, that's not going to work. I resign, do it now. And then take the next couple of weeks to call your client, say, hey, this is Dan, I'm doing something I have to do.
Well, listen.
Why not just reverse the order here? I mean, you're running to be the Florida's top cop.
It's a fair question. It's a fair question. I learned that BP was I learned my firm had been hired by BP to handle Florida matters just a few weeks ago. Within a week, I had decided I was leaving, and within 2 to 3 weeks, I had actually given notice. To leave all your pleadings on all your cases would really have been irresponsible as a lawyer. And frankly, I think if your question is why would you leave after 3 weeks rather than after 1 week or 2 weeks?
Why not 1 hour?
Well, listen, I'm a lawyer. I'm responsible to my clients. And I don't know that there's a big difference between 1 week and 3. Nothing happened in intervening time. I knew pretty quickly I would be leaving. but you have to make arrangements to take care of your clients. It's an oath of an attorney, and frankly, I wasn't about to just abandon them without even the courtesy of a phone call to tell them that I wouldn't be handling their case or showing up in court or doing any of the legal work for them.
I guess I'd come at it from the other side. Even criminals deserve a lawyer. So I'm not sure that.
You don't think I should have left?
I'm not sure.
Well, listen, I'll tell you that I don't believe that lawyers embrace the defects and flaws or virtues of their clients. You're lawyers, and I've been a lawyer a long time. I'm AV rated. I'm listed in Best Lawyers in America. Been a pretty good lawyer. But I'm running for a very specific job, and this is a very unique case. And I did not feel it was appropriate for me to have any association with the company. Because I'm of counsel as my affiliation, I'm not a partner. I don't have anything to do with the firm's sort of business. I don't share in their profits. I'm sort of on my own as that affiliation. But firm made its decision. I learned about it afterwards and said I have to make mine. I thought I did it fairly quickly and responsibly for my clients. And by the way, I mean, I think the question you should be asking is there anything in my record, anything to suggest that, I mean, I've gone after BP as hard as anyone in the state of Florida. I've been, just last week, I actually announced I thought we ought to modify our criminal statutes and other things to deal with some issues that will put them, I think, in a tougher spot. So I don't have a problem. There's nothing in my record to suggest that I'm not going to be, and I have a much better environmental record than anyone running for this office. I didn't support Senate Bill 360, which is the thing that allowed developers to do what they want in the community. I have a pretty good record, a great record on these issues. So the only question is whether I should have abandoned clients immediately or whether I did it in a more responsible manner. And I think a couple weeks is not that long a time, especially since I had nothing to do with the matter, and I think I was trying to be a responsible attorney.
Can I ask about some of your fellow attorneys? This is more so on the other side of the state, but there are attorneys working with people who are here without papers and who basically, as they're just about to be shipped out of the country, take all their money, claiming to be able to get them to stay in the United States. And
you're talking about we had immigration fraud?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I actually prosecuted an attorney who did exactly that many years ago. It's an old scam where he was taking payroll deductions from people who were out of status, and then ultimately they would get picked up and they would have already paid him. It was pretty horrible deal. You know, I put the guy in jail, the one I went after. It's obviously a crime to do something like that if it's a fraud. Other than that, it's just a terrible practice that the bar ought to look at.
well, you'd say that's more something for the
It depends on whether it's. I mean, you know, look, you have to meet the elements of a crime, and if there's not a misrepresentation, then it's not a crime. But I don't know the specifics of the scenario. But I actually had a case, ironically, where an attorney was taking in, had dozens, maybe more than that, of clients that were getting payroll deductions from the employers so that they could work here legally, and he was doing nothing for them other than taking the deduction, and that was just an outright fraud, obviously, and he was disbarred and I think went to jail, but I'm familiar with that sort of scam.
Back to BP for a moment. You
Yeah.
said you'd suggested changes in criminal law that
Yeah.
might even apply. Is it fair to change laws sort of retroactively to go out back even either criminally or on the civil side in terms of the amount of damages they might be held liable for?
It depends. It's a great question, and I think we should, whatever we can do, we ought to do. There are some things that maybe retroactively you cannot do because they turn on some substantive right that you can't go back and do, and people understand that instinctively. But for instance, how BP administers the claims process ought to be a deceptive trade. It ought to come under the deceptive trade practices law, or we could do things because that hasn't happened yet. And if they do something deceptive in that, we ought to do something. A court in the Second District Court of Appeals also made a finding in one of its rulings that fishermen did not have interest in the fish that were hurt through pollution in a case. And so districts may need some clarification as to whether or not a fisherman has a financial interest. And I think there are things we can do. There are going to be limits on what we can do. But frankly, I think to not do something is a mistake. You know.
As perhaps Florida's top law enforcement officer, if elected, well, you would be Florida's top law enforcement officer, how would you approach immigration in the context of the Arizona conversation? I guess the question is, as Florida law is written today, can police officers walk up to someone on the street and do what they can do in Arizona?
Well, I know the Arizona laws changed a little bit, but my understanding of it was that I don't believe a police officer can like walk up and say, show me your papers. Like they can't do his complexion suggests that he wasn't from here, and there has to be you can't stop a person unless you have some articulable suspicion of criminal conduct. So that's the first thing, and that's the law probably everywhere in the country because it's a constitutional right. I don't support the Arizona law. I think we have one of the highest violent crime rates in the country, and I don't want to take our police force and say, now we want to put you on immigration duty. I don't think it's the right thing to do, and frankly, I don't think it comports with my view of a democracy to have police asking people for their papers.
What do you support?
Well, I support the last immigration bill, I thought, coming out of the federal Congress. I mean, it's not really a state issue, but I thought that had been put together thoughtfully. And I have actually supported, I did it as a prosecutor, and I actually had a bill a few years ago. I think when somebody commits a felony, what really happens in Florida, which is wrong, if someone who's here illegally or out of status commits a crime, too often they go through the state justice system and are released back into the community without ever anybody knowing. That's just wrong. There's no reason why somebody who is here really at the sufferance of our nation can commit an offense, be convicted, go through the justice system, and be released. There are procedures to cross-designate, I guess, or certify local law enforcement to work.
7G program.
Right, that's exactly right. And I had a bill a few years ago to actually make sure that was implemented, because it wasn't implemented in all the reception centers. And I think that's, to me, something, because I think someone who commits a felony is a self-selected group of someone who needs to be thought about.
You probably witnessed cases where they're convicted, they're deported, and they show back up in the community in a year or so.
Re-entry after deportation.
Is there any, obviously there's laws on the books to try to prevent that, but it's not. Is there anything the state can do?
Very little.
To toughen that?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're a free society. We have a lot of, we allow our borders to be pretty much open, other than in the federal immigration authorities, ICE or INS, whatever their configuration has been, have really not done their job in figuring out how to track people coming in and out. And it's very easy, especially here in Florida. We have very porous borders, and I think that the state really can't do a whole lot. And look, you talk to state attorneys and police and sheriffs, they're under huge budget cuts right now. The question really is this going to be the priority of law enforcement when we have all these other crimes that are going on in our state? And there really are crimes. We have a third or second or fourth highest violent crime rate in the country, and it's only, I think, going to get worse because Florida's economy is not going to improve as well as everybody else's. So I really think your local law enforcement have to be focused on street crime, economic crime, things that protect everyday people. It's the federal government's job to take care of our borders.
How will your thoughts and ideas about the environment play out as a member of the state cabinet?
Well, I've been very strong on environmental issues. There are bills where I've been one of the few people voting against them. The bill to extend the Everglades cleanup, I was one of the few legislators years ago who voted against it. This Senate bill last year that really gave developers the ability to advance their developments without paying for it, I voted against, I rallied against, and my opponent supported, I think, those measures. So I really believe the great gifts of our state are, it's our beaches, it's our green space, it's things like that. And as a custodian of the lands, which is what the cabinet is, I will be very strong about that. I will not, anything I can do to keep our state with its extraordinary natural gifts, I will.
Should we, the cabinet gets involved in land purchases,
Yep.
Bringing out of the public sector
Right.
into, is that something that the cabinet should proceed with? I'm thinking of sugarcane fields and factories around Lake Okeechobee, to be specific.
Well, I do think that whether it's Florida Forever or, I mean, I do like the land purchases. I've supported them generally in the legislature. I think, in fact, it's a good thing to take land out of circulation when you can, and I have supported the deal with the Everglades and sugar, having to do with those swaths of land that I think will help clean up the Everglades. I've supported it, and things like that I have. I think that's a good long-term goal of the cabinet. It should be a long-term goal of our citizens to make sure we have an inventory of land that is available and that isn't isn't being paved over. I think that's important for our environment.
Does it make sense to you that if you have two bad guys with guns in a car and they're driving down the street and they're looking for a guy who did them wrong in a drug deal, and they see him and they aim and they shoot at him, and this innocent bystander is hit by the bullet instead, and the guy they were aiming for doesn't get hit, but an innocent bystander just minding their own business gets killed, okay? But because they didn't intend to shoot her, that wasn't intentional, they can only be charged, if at all, on second-degree murder rather than first.
Yeah, I don't know.
In other words, they can't get.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with that. That is the configuration of the law. There are other facts, but if you show incredible reckless abandon, and if you intend to kill somebody, it ought to be a first-degree murder. If you miss, I'd have to know the facts more seriously than that. I don't want to give it on the fly.
That actually happened.
Yeah, no, it sounds like sounds like a real case. But
is that something that's up to each state attorney when he reviews?
No. Well, look, there's a lot of discretion with prosecutors, but those elements of a crime, and I don't know the precise answer for you, and I don't want to.
But the principle is important.
Yeah, the principle to me is and the law is full of examples of wanton and disregard, which qualify as very high levels of intent, even if the specific intent, although murder is a specific intent crime, so you can't duck that element requirement. Although clearly, so I'd have to know more. There may be transferred intent, which is another proposition of law that is well used. I mean, there are plenty of ways the jury system and our criminal justice code allows transferred intent, reckless disregard, wanton disregard to qualify as if you intended yourself, because often that is an equivalent intent requirement. But I don't know the facts well enough to give you an opinion on the fly.
I've been asking that question for about 5 years, and that's the most thoughtful answer I've ever gotten.
Well,
thank you.
Will the next Attorney General have a hand in the redistricting process in 2012?
Yeah, I think the Attorney General has to do a certification on it. And I am very, I think what the legislature did this last legislative session was close to one of the worst things it's ever done. 1.7 million Floridians put on the ballot redistricting measures that would allow people to pick their legislators rather than legislators picking their people. And the only difference between the current system is it didn't allow people to write their districts based on incumbency or partisan advantage. And so the legislature actually decided that was unacceptable, so it put its own measure on the ballot that would allow legislators to draw their own districts to advance their own interests. Horrible orgy of self-interest, okay, by the legislature. Just really downright rotten at the core. And I spent a day on the floor standing up fighting it on behalf of the fair districts, but really on behalf of good government. And I hope the Supreme Court throws it off the ballot, that other measure, which I think was just mischief and nothing less.
And if it doesn't, do you think any of the three measures have a chance of passing?
I think the two good measures, 5 and 6, will pass. My hope is that Floridians see Amendment 7 for what it is, which is basically an evil plot. Okay. I'm not kidding. It was really, I mean, it was, yeah, that might have been I'm sorry, a overuse of the language.
We've got time for one last question.
How are you making yourself known in this area? We know your opponent, I believe, better than you.
Well, I've come here quite a bit, and I go to events, I meet with people, I do the things that you do. I think people aren't really focused on this race yet, and I think they will focus it. I mean, the other races are sort of like an episode of Survivor, and ours has been sort of masterpiece theater, in terms of the friction and the heat. But that said, I think people will want to know who their lawyer's going to be. They're hiring a lawyer, and I have a lot more experience than my opponent. I have a lot more. I don't know that he's tried a case to a jury ever. And I don't know if he spent more than a couple years as an AG, and he was running for office while he was there. I spent my time as an actual prosecutor for nearly a decade, not running for office, doing the things you do to learn how to be a good lawyer. And I didn't handle just little cases. I handled some of the biggest cases in Florida, public corruption cases with some big officials, civil rights cases, gang, drug cartels. And I think people they're hiring their lawyer, they want somebody who's done the job at a level that they want their attorney general, when decisions about property and liberty are being made, to be the most experienced person in the room, not the least experienced person in the room. And I think, compared to my opponent, I have a lot more experience in all the areas that you need to. I've argued big appeals and tried big cases and managed people, and I think that's what you would hope your next Attorney General has.
And thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks.
You watching the clock there? That was pretty
I was.
good.
I was.